And welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. This one's a little rough to start out with because, as everyone knows by now, motorsports lost one of its defining figures of an entire generation. Late last week, the racing world was shaken by the reported passing of Kyle Busch at the age of 41. And honestly, I think a lot of fans right now still feel like this isn't real. I mean, we had an entire era of NASCAR fans that were dedicated to Kyle Busch and him being one of the greatest superstars of our generation. He wasn't just another driver on the entry list every Sunday. He represented NASCAR. He was NASCAR. Whether you rooted for him every week or, you spent years hoping somebody would knock him off the top, you watched because of him. Love it or hate it. He was the villain or he was your hero. You reacted because of him. NASCAR became louder, more emotional, and honestly more entertaining every time Kyle Busch stepped into a race car. Very few athletes in motorsports history could completely control the emotional energy of an entire crowd the way that Kyle Busch could. You could hear it during driver introductions. Half the crowd cheering, half the crowd booing, and Kyle almost feeding off of every second of it. That's incredibly rare in sports, and especially in motorsports. Kyle Busch was fearless. He was brutally honest, sometimes controversial, sometimes misunderstood. But above all else, he was authentic to who he was. He never pretended to be somebody else just to make people comfortable. And in modern sports, authenticity like that becomes an unforgettable feature in someone's personality. Then there was the racing itself. 2 Cup Series championships, over 200 wins across all the top 3 national series. One of the most naturally gifted race car drivers we've ever seen. Doesn't matter if it was short tracks, road courses, super speedways, intermediates, Truck Series, Xfinity, Busch / O'Reilly Series now, Cup Series, it didn't matter. Kyle Busch genuinely believed he could beat anybody in anything with 4 wheels. We saw him in the Legends cars recently, battling it out with people. And honestly, he thought he could win because he could. Most of the time, he could win. But I think that's what made Kyle different from so many other drivers, was that racing never felt like a job to him. It felt like just a natural progression of life. He raced because he loved racing, not because he had media obligations, not because sponsors expected it, not because he had to. Kyle Busch raced trucks on Friday night because he wanted to race trucks on Friday night. The passion connected with fans, whether they realized it or not. And as the years went on, even a lot of fans who hated Kyle Busch eventually started respecting him because he never stopped being himself. He never stopped being who he was. That's hard to do at the highest level in motorsports. Then beyond his own success, maybe the greatest impact on NASCAR came from helping young drivers. Kyle Busch Motorsports became one of the most important development programs we saw in racing for its era. So many stars in NASCAR today either raced for him, learned from him, or received opportunities because Kyle Busch believed in them early. And honestly, throughout this entire weekend, you could hear drivers talking about that influence over and over again with all the dedications at Charlotte before the Coke 600 and everything else, right? But Kyle Busch didn't just win races. He shaped careers, he shaped personalities, he shaped an era in motorsports, and we can't get past that. You can already feel the emptiness this leaves behind. The garage areas and those events will never sound the same. Driver intros won't feel it either. Sundays won't be the same without him because whether you loved him or hated him, Kyle Busch made people feel something, and that's the mark of a truly unforgettable athlete. So tonight, thoughts continue to go out to Samantha Busch, Brexton, and the Busch family, the whole staff at RCR, and everyone throughout the racing community grieving this unimaginable loss. For all the wins, for all the rivalries, and all the unforgettable moments, thank you, Rowdy. Rest in peace, Kyle Busch. We'll miss you.
I'm not surprised about anything. Congratulations.
Everything's great. Looking forward to a fantastic weekend here in Phoenix. Back to the racetrack. It's great. Looking forward to getting back to the racetrack and getting into my race car. Great. Really looking forward to getting in my race car and getting back here at Phoenix. It's great. Really looking forward to getting back into my car and being here in Phoenix.
Pure talent. That's about it. My pit crew did absolutely nothing to help me out tonight. My truck drove like and these splitters are absolutely horrendous. You can't pass in traffic. You can't race alongside anybody. You can't get within 5 truck lengths of no one. But somehow, some way, I was able to get back to the front. Had a blast.
I don't know if there was any highs. I don't know what you're talking about.
Coming back through the field?
That's just me.
Kyle, what was your thought about Keselowski's little pre-race declaration?
Who?
Brad Keselowski?
Yeah, I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay. He drives the number 12 car.
I saw it, but I passed it.
In there with the 53, they're late.
52, get it right. Don't know.
How did that impact your car?
Killed it.
What did you think? Were you happy that you were able to come back after the early damage?
Nope.
Here? Or what happened there at the beginning of the race?
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Here. How about the heat? What effect?
Felt great.
No fine out there the whole time?
Any thoughts that you're going to a place where you won last year in Richmond?
Nope, can't pass there.
You feel okay about your chances overall?
Don't care.
Does it help you at all that you got the bonus points coming in here, coming out of this race?
Just here so I don't get fined.
Do you feel like if you had been able to get the top 10,
I'm answering the dumbest questions over and over again. Am I good?
All right, as difficult as it is to transition away from this week, the motorsports world still gave us one of the busiest and most emotional Memorial Day weekends we've had in years. Honestly, nowhere was that emotion felt more heavily than the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Let's start with NASCAR's weekend at Charlotte. Honestly, this race weekend felt bigger than racing. You could feel it from the moment teams arrived at the racetrack. Every Cup car carried the black number 8 decals in honor of Kyle Busch. Drivers spoke emotionally throughout the weekend. Fans filled the grandstands wearing old M&M's gear and Rowdy merchandise. And for maybe the first time in a long time, the entire NASCAR garage genuinely felt united emotionally. Starting with the Truck Series, the absence of Kyle Busch was impossible to ignore. Just 1 week earlier, Kyle had won at Dover in the Truck Series, still doing exactly what he always loved most, and that was racing anything, anywhere, against anybody. Throughout the truck garage, you could hear drivers talking about how much Kyle Busch helped shape the modern NASCAR talent as we know it. A huge percentage of today's stars either raced directly for Kyle Busch Motorsports or were influenced by the standard that Kyle brought to the truck competition. The racing itself at Charlotte was classic intermediate track NASCAR. You had tire wear definitely mattered, track position mattered, long run speed mattered, and honestly, Charlotte continues proving why it's still one of the best mile-and-a-half tracks NASCAR has. Then moving into the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, strategy became a major story. Multiple teams gambled on late race pit strategy, trying to gain track position and changing difficult track conditions throughout the race, made crew chief decisions incredibly difficult. It was one of those races where patience and tire management mattered just as much as outright speed. But obviously the biggest story of the weekend came Sunday night during the Coca-Cola 600, and somehow it almost felt scripted. Daniel Suárez drove to one of the most emotional victories NASCAR has seen in years. Suárez captured the Coca-Cola 600 driving the number 7 Chevrolet for Spire Motorsports, only the third Cup victory of his career, but easily the biggest and most emotional, and afterwards Suárez dedicated the win directly to Kyle Busch. Honestly, if you know Daniel Suárez's story, that moment became even more emotional. A lot of fans forget Kyle Busch played a huge role in Daniel Suárez's early NASCAR development through Kyle Busch Motorsports. Years ago, Kyle believed Suárez, before much of NASCAR fully did. Kyle gave him opportunities, Kyle helped him develop, and to see Suárez honor him in victory lane after winning one of NASCAR's crown jewel races, it was just one of the moments bigger than sports itself, right? Tyler Reddick honestly looked dominant in his car most of the night. He led 119 laps and once again showed why 23XI Racing continues becoming one of the strongest organizations in NASCAR. Christopher Bell recovered from pit road mistakes to finish second. Denny Hamlin stayed consistently near the front all evening long. And despite weather concerns through the race, the racing product itself remained outstanding all night long. Your Coca-Cola 600 top 10 look like this: Daniel Suárez, Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin in third, Tyler Reddick in fourth, Kyle Larson coming up fifth, Ty Gibbs in sixth, Ryan Blaney seventh, Joey Logano with the top 10, which is good to see for the rough start he's had to the year, in eighth place, William Byron in ninth, and Zane Smith rounded out the top 10. And Zane Smith honestly had good momentum in the very first stage. It was looking pretty good for him, but one of the other emotional moments during the weekend came from Richard Childress Racing announcing they would effectively set aside the iconic number 8 for future, with hopes that Brexton Busch may someday drive that number himself. And honestly, that's the kind of thing that reminds you how deeply personal motorsports really is. It's competition and it's business, but at the end of the day, racing is still family. Before we leave the stock car world, we do need to discuss some other stuff for the NASCAR Hall of Fame news and information that came out last week. So let's touch base on that real quick. We had some major names heading into the NASCAR Hall of Fame as the class of 2027 was officially announced this week. Honestly, it's hard to argue with the lineup. Headlining the class is former Cup Series champion Kevin Harvick, who received a massive 92% of the modern era ballot vote. Harvick's Hall of Fame credentials are obvious on paper with 60 Cup Series wins, the 2014 championship, a Daytona 500 victory, 3 Brickyard 400 wins, and one of the most consistent careers in NASCAR in the modern era. What really makes Harvick a Hall of Famer goes beyond statistics. He entered the Cup Series under impossible circumstances in 2001, taking over the RCR number 29 car immediately following the death of Dale Earnhardt Sr. That was one of the most pressure-filled situations any young driver has ever faced. And not only did Harvick survive it, he won it in just his third Cup start from Atlanta, and one of the sport's most emotional finishes of that era. Then later in his career, he completely revitalized Stewart-Haas Racing when he moved there in 2014. That combination with Rodney Childers immediately produced a championship and turned Harvick into arguably one of the most dominant weekly drivers of the late 2010s. For nearly a decade, if you showed up at an intermediate track, the 4-car was the benchmark. Joining him in the Hall of Fame will be Jeff Burton, and Burton's introduction really represents more than just race wins. Now, statistically, Burton absolutely belongs. He earned 21 Cup Series victories during one of NASCAR's most competitive eras, won some crown jewel races, and was a major part of Roush Racing's rise during the late 1990s. At his peak, Burton was one of the smoothest and smartest drivers in the garage area. But the biggest reason many people believe Burton deserves a Hall of Fame spot is because of what he's done outside the race car, especially regarding driver safety and leadership inside the garage. For years, Burton became one of the key voices representing drivers during a major discussion with NASCAR leadership. He helped bridge communication between competitors and the sanctioning body, periods where the sport was rapidly changing with safety innovation, car development, and racing procedures. After the deaths of drivers like Dale Earnhardt Sr., Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin Jr., and Tony Roper around the turn of the century, NASCAR entered one of the most important safety revolutions in motorsports history. Burton was one of the respected veteran voices pushing for a collaboration, effort, and improvement behind the scenes for that. Even after retirement, Burton stays heavily involved through NASCAR competition discussions and broadcast work within NBC, where he's consistently explained the technical and safety side of the sport to the fans. Drivers across multiple generations have talked about how much Burton helped mentor younger competitors and advocate for safer racing environments overall. So while some fans may look at Burton and immediately compare his win total to other Hall of Famers, his impact on the NASCAR culture, communication, and safety innovation is a huge reason why he's entering the Hall of Fame now. The Pioneer Ballot inductee is short track legend Larry Phillips, and honestly this one of those selections hardcore racing historians absolutely love because Phillips is one of the greatest grassroots racers America has ever produced. His career reportedly includes more than over 1,000 NASCAR sanctioned victories and 2,000 total wins overall. He won 5 NASCAR Weekly Series national championships and became a legend across all short tracks throughout the Midwest. This selection is important because it reminds people that NASCAR history is not just built on Daytonas and Charlottes and Atlantas. It was built at local dirt tracks and weekly bull rings by drivers like Larry Phillips. He represented the backbone of stock car racing for decades, and we're definitely going to touch on him on a later episode. Also receiving honors was Lisa France Kennedy, who earned the Landmark Award for outstanding contributions to NASCAR. As one of the most influential executives in modern history of the sport, Kennedy played a major role in NASCAR's growth, business development, and national expansion during the 2000s era. The NASCAR Hall of Fame class of 2027 will officially be inducted in on January 22nd in Charlotte, and overall, this class feels like a balanced representation of NASCAR history, a modern superstar in Kevin Harvick, a respected leader and safety advocate in Jeff Burton, and a grassroots racing icon like Larry Phillips. I mean, it's a pretty solid lineup overall. I know a lot of people are probably going to get a lot of hate for some of that, but there's a million people that could be in the Hall of Fame, right? You just have a short select few that make it. Now, while NASCAR was delivering emotional moments in Charlotte, Formula One may have quietly delivered one of the biggest changing of the guard weekends we've seen in years. So let's head over to Montreal for that one, for the Canadian Grand Prix. And honestly, Formula One suddenly feels completely different right now. For years, the conversation centered around Red Bull dominance and Max Verstappen controlling the sport. But entering Montreal this weekend, it finally started feeling like Formula One has entered a brand new era. The biggest storyline entering Canada centered around Mercedes rookie sensation Kimi Antonelli. And thinking about how crazy this is, at 19 years old, only 5 races into his Formula One career, and already entering the weekend leading the championship after 3 straight victories. Suddenly, the entire paddock is asking the same question. Is this already the next superstar of Formula One? And honestly, after Montreal, it's getting kind of hard to argue against it. This was also the first sprint weekend ever held at this circuit, which immediately created chaos. You had practice sessions that were pretty messy. Drivers fought changing track conditions. Several red flags interrupted running of the race and practice and all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, we had all kinds of track stoppages overall, I guess would be the best way to say it. And the famous Wall of Champions once again became one of the biggest talking points of the weekend. So Mercedes immediately looked fast from the beginning, right? You had George Russell grabbing a sprint pole and continued what was quietly becoming an incredible season for Mercedes. Meanwhile, McLaren once again showed excellence on pace, but continued fighting questions about race strategy and consistency. Ferrari also looked stronger than it had in weeks, especially Lewis Hamilton, and honestly this may have been Hamilton's best overall weekend since joining Ferrari. Qualifying itself was absolutely incredible. George Russell stole the pole with a fantastic lap. Antonelli qualified second beside him on the front row. McLaren locked out row 2 with Norris and Piastri. Hamilton qualified 5th and Verstappen in 6th. The field was incredibly close. Then Sunday's race became complete chaos almost immediately. Rain threatened the race before the green flag ever dropped, forcing teams into strategy gambles before lap 1. McLaren rolled the dice with alternate tire strategy. Mercedes focused on track position, while Ferrari stayed conservative pretty early on. Then the race turned into a battle between the Mercedes teammates. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli fought aggressively for the lead early on, and honestly it gave off serious Hamilton-Rosberg-Mercedes rivalry vibes from years ago. But then Russell retired with mechanical problems while battling near the front, completely changing the race. Once that happened, Antonelli took control, and honestly, he drove it like a veteran. He was pretty calm. He's very precise and very controlled. There was no panic, no mistakes, no overdriving, just complete confidence from the driver. Antonelli drove to another massive Formula One victory and officially becoming the clear championship favorite moving forward. Lewis Hamilton finished second in Ferrari's strongest performance of the year, and honestly, Montreal looked like vintage Lewis Hamilton territory once again. Max Verstappen rounded out the podium in third, but Red Bull still doesn't look untouchable anymore. The dominant advantage they've had over the field for the last few years suddenly feels gone. You know, you got everybody else chomping at the bit, taking over the real estate they used to own. But let's talk about the top 10 real quick, because you had Kimi Antonelli with the win, Lewis Hamilton in second, Max Verstappen in third, Charles Leclerc in fourth, so double top fives for Ferrari, Isaac Hadjar in fifth, Franco Colapinto in sixth, Liam Lawson in seventh, Pierre Gasly in eighth, Carlos Sainz in ninth, and Oliver Behrman in 10th. And honestly, one of the biggest takeaways from Montreal for us is this: Formula One suddenly feels kind of unpredictable again. Mercedes is back, Ferrari's looking improved, McLaren has speed but keeps making mistakes, and Red Bull no longer feels invincible, and that's great for Formula One as a series. Alright, before we jump into our main Indy 500 recap segment, as it's the biggest weekend in motorsports for us, if you've been enjoying Historic Hot Laps, now is the perfect time to help us support the show. Make sure you're following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Share the show with another racing fan. And if you really want to help us grow, leave a 5-star review, because that genuinely helps more motorsports fans discover Historic Hot Laps. You can also follow the show on social medias at Historic Hot Laps for racing history posts. We do a lot of shorts every week for every episode, updates, new announcements. We repost a lot of news articles on there. All right, let's get into what has been one of the greatest Indianapolis 500s in the last few years here, because it was pretty exciting. Now it's time for the main story of the week, the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500. And honestly, this race had absolutely everything. You had the history of it, the chaos, rain delays, strategy, heartbreak. One of the greatest finishes we've seen in modern motorsports history. Before we even got to race day, the entire month of May felt enormous to everyone. Alex Blow entered the Indy 500 weekend as a defending champion, 4-time IndyCar champion, looking almost unbeatable. He captured the pole position, averaging 232 miles an hour and some change. Immediately became the race favorite, right? As to be expected with how he's been running the last year and a half, 2 years. But honestly, the field felt incredibly deep this year. You had Helio Castroneves chasing the drive for 5 once again at 51 years old. Pato O'Ward trying to finally break through after so many near misses and painful runner-ups. David Maluk is looking for his first IndyCar win on the biggest stage possible. And honestly, if you watched it, you know how close he was. Alexander Rossi battling through injuries after a terrifying practice crash earlier in the month. Catherine Legge attempting the double, racing both the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 in the same day. Then Carb Day arrived, and honestly, Carb Day at Indy is one of the coolest traditions anywhere in motorsports. You've got packed grandstands. I mean, we were there in it. We know it was busy. It was packed. Final practice, pit stop competition, concerts, helicopters flying over the Speedway, practicing the flyovers. I mean, the whole day is just wild, right? The entire city of Indianapolis suddenly revolves around one race for the weekend once you hit that Carb Day, and you could feel the anticipation building all weekend long. Then finally Sunday arrived. Over 350,000 fans packed the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, once again making it the largest sporting event on Earth. And despite weather concerns throughout the morning, the atmosphere still felt electric, and I gotta tell you, it was gorgeous in the morning. It really was. The pre-race ceremonies were absolutely classic in Indianapolis. You had the back home again in Indiana, you had the military tributes, the helicopters overhead, the command to start the engines, and then finally 33 drivers rolling towards a green flag, right? The race immediately turned chaotic. Drivers knew weather could become a factor later in the afternoon, so it was aggressive from lap 1, honestly. The aggression started early. Catherine Legge's double attempt unfortunately ended early after getting caught in an accident involving Ryan Hunter-Reay. It was heartbreaking because just attempting both races is already almost impossible in modern motorsports. And for her day to end so quickly, I mean, it's just a bummer, really, overall. And it was, wrong place, wrong time. There wasn't much she could do about it. She just caught up in somebody else's mistake. Then you had Ed Carpenter suffering a painful Indianapolis heartbreak after spinning following contact with Takuma Sato. And honestly, every year Indianapolis finds new ways to emotionally destroy drivers chasing their first win. Meanwhile, up front, some familiar names stayed in the lead all afternoon. You had Alex Palou looking incredibly fast early, leading most of the laps. Scott Dixon methodically worked towards the front because somehow Scott Dixon is always a factor at Indy. And he, had we gotten a rain call, the halfway mark, was in the lead when we stopped the race for rain on the track. So it honestly looked like he could have wrapped up another one, but the clouds parted and we got more racing. Pato O'Ward, he remained aggressive all afternoon. And quite frankly, Felix Rosenqvist kept hanging around the front. Not real flashy, not dramatic, just consistently fast all month long. Then we had some more rain. The red flag around lap 106 completely changed the race. Suddenly, crew chiefs had to think about fuel strategy, pit cycles, weather windows, and whether the race might actually end early, right? And honestly, once the race resumed, the intensity somehow became even greater. 3-wide racing on every corner that could be. Aggressive restarts, traffic constantly changing everything. Nobody had a dominant enough car to pull away, and eventually it became obvious the thing was going to come down to the final lap. And then came the closing laps. Helio Castroneves' dream of recording his 5th Indy 500 victory ended when mechanical problems after he had already become the all-time Indianapolis 500 mileage leader earlier in the race. He suffered a lot of issues mechanically with that car. Pato O'Ward kept charging. Palou stayed in contention. Suddenly, David Malukas looked like the man to beat. He took the white flag leading the Indianapolis 500, and honestly, he was pulling away. It looked over. It looked like he had found something that no one else had found. Speed-wise, it looked like he was about to become the Indy 500 champion for the 110th running. But Felix Rosenqvist got an incredible run entering the backstretch after battling wheel-to-wheel with his teammate, which if you have not seen that, please go back and watch it because it's incredible. That last lap is insane. And a shout out to Will Buxton because it was also called so greatly. And I know a lot of people on the haters are like, oh, it's American race and Will Buxton, he sounds funny or whatever. But no, the guy's incredible. The guy's so passionate about motorsports. And the call he made for that lap was insane. I was exhausted for him just listening to how much passion he put into it. So thank you, Will Buxton. Amazing, amazing call. Appreciate you for what you do. All right, let's get back into it. So we got wheel-to-wheel action, side-by-side with teammates. Felix Rosenqvist, he becomes committed to one of the boldest moves you've ever seen in Indianapolis. Full commitment around the outside on every turn. One move for immortality, and somehow he pulled it off. Felix Rosenqvist crossed the line, the yard of bricks, just 0.0233 seconds ahead of David Malukas in the officially closest finish in Indianapolis history. I mean, think about that. After 500 miles, after nearly 3 hours of racing, the difference between immortality and heartbreak was barely 0.02 of a second. Absolutely unbelievable. Rosenqvist climbed from the car in a complete disbelief. He had the milk, he had the wreath, he kissed the bricks. That moment changes a driver's life forever. Felix Rosenqvist getting the win. David Malukas in a heartbreak, barely lost. Second place finish. Difference in time for third, fourth, and fifth was just as insane as first and second. 3 wide with just front wings barely overlapping. I mean, it was crazy. But Felix Rosenqvist reportedly earned $4.34 million from the record-setting Indianapolis 500 purse. And honestly, this race reminded everybody exactly why the Indy 500 still matters so much. Legends chasing history, young stars chasing immortality, one massive crowd, one unforgettable finish, and that's Indianapolis. That's why drivers spend their entire careers trying to win just one race. All right, now, we're not doing history this week because there's just so much going on, and, it just doesn't feel right with everything that happened this week and all the monumental events. But we can't get out of here with talking about dirt racing. We got to show some love for that. So while Indianapolis was delivering one of the greatest finishes in racing history, sprint car racing also had a huge Memorial Day weekend. You had the World of Outlaws rolling to Knoxville Raceway on the 23rd for the Stars and Stripes salute. And honestly, anytime sprint cars show up at Knoxville, it just feels bigger. Aaron Reitzel absolutely dominated the feature. He led every lap for a massive victory. Donnie Schatz reminded everybody why Knoxville Raceway is practically his second home with another strong podium finish. Rico Abreu finished third while David Gravel continued another consistent points night. And honestly, one of the biggest stories right now in sprint car racing is just how balanced the competition feels. There's no single dominant driver. You got Reitzel's hot, Gravel stays consistent, Macedo has incredible speed, Kofoid keeps getting stronger, and Schatz is just dangerous at Knoxville, right? So you know how that's going to go. Then the Outlaws moved to Huset Speedway on May 25th, and honestly, this became Buddy Kofoid's statement win. Kofoid worked methodically through the field before taking complete control late in the race, and what's becoming obvious now as the Buddy Kofoid is no longer just viewed as a talented young driver, he's becoming a true star of sprint car racing. Sheldon Haudenschild finished second. Aaron Reitzel backed up his Knoxville victory with another podium. David Gravel continued a strong points run in fourth, and Donnie Schatz rounded out that top 5. Honestly, sprint car racing's feeling pretty healthy right now, and we've got to respect that. You've got huge crowds, you've got fantastic racing, veterans and young stars battling together every night. The World of Outlaws has been absolutely delivering lately. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up the episode for us this week. Episode 90. Can't believe we're at 90 episodes. I mean, we're getting close to the triple digits, right? This is one of the most emotional episodes we've had to record with everything that happened at the 500, the legacy that we've got to accept Kyle Busch is gone and leaving for us. I mean, we got to honor Kyle Busch for what he is. It's a huge weekend in motorsports. Memorial Day reminded us exactly why motorsports means so much to so many people. Again, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow the podcast, share the show with another racing fan. Follow Historic Hot Laps on social media at Historic Hot Laps. For all the people I got to chat with in Indy, whether it was in Lot 1A, whether it was in the Turn 3 grandstands, wherever it was at, appreciate it if you're listening. Appreciate all of you more than you know. Take care, everybody. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in.
Because you never know when the last one is, so